European nations unless there's a deal for Greenland, and he dismissed criticism from some U.S. allies who say he is endangering the NATO alliance.
I've had such a good relationship. I've made it so much better, so much stronger. It's so good now. I don't agree with a lot of the things they've done, but that was done before I got there. NATO's, whether you like it or not, it's only as good as we are. If NATO doesn't have us, NATO is not very strong.
The Trump administration's investigation into Minnesota officials is ramping up. Steve Harrigan reports from Minneapolis.
Subpoenas have been issued for the governor and the mayor for interfering with the work of federal agents. And the border commander here said basically the elected officials, as well as those protesters, are working hand in hand.
It's that collusion and corruption between elected officials and these anarchists that are intent on creating violence for law enforcement.
As for that church service that was interrupted so aggressively on Sunday by a couple of dozen protesters who screamed in the faces of parishioners for about half an hour, administration officials now say they expect several arrests to be made.
Thousands of people are expected at the annual March for Life this Friday. As Chris Woodward explains, some of them will be pro-life OBGYNs.
The American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs represents approximately 8,000 pro-life medical professionals across the country. Dr. Christina Francis is the head of the organization, and she says the group is very excited to be at the National March, where it will join with other pro-life people in celebrating the fact that all life is a gift.
You know, we as physicians always say that when we're caring for a pregnant woman, we're caring for two patients at once. And so we will be there to represent the care that we provide to both of our patients, both moms and babies. And, you know, it's always a very encouraging time to gather with other people who are there to defend the dignity and the beauty of each and every life.
While the pro-life movement has faced some frustrations, Francis says this will be a very good time to encourage one another and meet with lawmakers. The theme of this year's march is Life is a Gift. I'm Chris Woodward.
U.S. futures are higher and world shares are mixed ahead of President Trump's speech to the World Economic Forum. On Tuesday, the S&P 500 fell 2.1%, the Dow lost 1.8%, and the Nasdaq Composite fell 2.4%. More news online at afn.net and the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, January 21st, and can you believe it has been a year since President Donald Trump was inaugurated for his second term? So he made headlines yesterday in the press room talking about his accomplishments for the first year, and everyone's eye is on the midterms for 2026, and there are some key state races as well, including the race for governor here in my home state of Florida. This is one of the most interesting races, and I think one that everyone is paying the most attention to because our current governor, Ron DeSantis, is term limited, and so who can follow in his footsteps and lead the free state of Florida, because no one who is conservative and moved to this state because of his leadership, including me, wants to see this state go backward or become purple in any way, shape, or form in terms of policy or those wins. And so the Republican primary is Byron Donalds, who is the current congressman, very well known because of his Fox News hits. And in my opinion, that's really all that he does, is just go on media hits and can't really point to anything that he's actually accomplished for Florida. And then the former Speaker of the House, Paul Renner's campaign is really firing up this week, and we are glad to have him join this morning. He's the former Speaker of the House, a veteran, a state prosecutor, and a legislator. And so good morning, Speaker. We really appreciate you joining. And I want to just, for those who maybe don't know Byron Donalds' history and record and, maybe lack thereof, I just wonder if you could draw a contrast of why you're running and why there are so many people, especially if you look online, that are saying very vocally in the state of Florida, never Byron, the state will never, be turned to Byron. I think a lot of people who maybe haven't been paying attention to Florida politics outside the state are a little surprised by that. But those here in Florida, we're really not surprised.
Well, it comes down to whether your service is for other people, for service above self, or service for yourself. And if you look at our respective records, we came into politics at the same time. He actually ran against me for Speaker of the House here in our state House of Representatives. And my whole life has been dedicated to public service from the time I was 23 on the deck of the USS McInerney in the Northern Gulf, 20 plus years in the military, 2 wars, and leadership under pressure as a state prosecutor, as you noted, and as Speaker of the House, really focusing on getting things done, as contrasted with someone who has never really led anything and wants now to be the leader of the free state of Florida and has not done anything in office. And to the extent he has, it's been weak. It's been questionable. You scratch your head and say, is this guy really a Republican or a conservative? And that's true on issue after issue. I pointed out on public safety, he's been arrested not once but twice. He came into the state legislature and pushed soft on crime legislation to let people out after 6.5 years on a 10-year sentence. So you see him on the street corner and thinking they were going to still be in prison, and has talked about police brutality as a problem in America. Being anti-cop is not what we expect from a governor of Florida. And I've been tough on crime, obviously, as a prosecutor and as Speaker of the House.
Yeah, and Governor DeSantis was actually on this program last week and was also saying that Byron's policy doesn't reflect his, and was pointing actually to your record as Speaker during that term, and said that that term was, in his view, the best that ever for the in the history of the Republican Party. So what, he didn't really go into details for that, but what were those accomplishments when you were Speaker under Governor Ron DeSantis?
Well, probably too much for us on this show, but look, universal school choice in education, parents and students decide the best school for their children, protecting the Heartbeat Protection Act to protect life, ending DEI programs, pushing back against ESG, which co-ops our 401k to control our decisions regardless of elections, protecting cops, passing constitutional carry. The list goes on, protecting our children from online pornography and addictive social media platforms where a lot of kids are identified by sex predators. These kinds of things, ending transgender surgeries for minors, keeping boys out of girls' bathrooms. The list goes on of conservative accomplishments. And James Madison called our first session the session of the century for a reason. And Jenna, I focused on the mission. And this is what, as a veteran, there's a lot of ego and arrogance in politics. My goal in those 2 years I had as Speaker is to put as many conservative wins on the board. We did that, and that's by just pushing forward and focusing on other people, not focusing on our own, self-promotion, which is what we see from too many politicians like Congressman Donalds that are just going on TV. They're all about themselves. They seem to be getting very rich in office, and that's not who we want in office. We want people that are dedicated to the people and will put Florida first.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, Speaker Renner, that it seems like, especially in this media-heavy age, that if we look at what happened with the New York City mayor's race, the only reason that Zoran Mamdani, an actual socialist, gets elected is because he popped off online, and he had some kind of witty videos. He created this following, and nobody really looked seriously at his policies, or if they did, they really didn't recognize them as socialists. They just said, "Oh, he says that he's going to give us a lot of great things," but they're not actually connected connecting the dots and thinking about what that policy means for the city. And I don't want that same thing to happen here in Florida. And so how do you, when you talk to potential voters in Florida, how do you connect those dots and say, this isn't just a great state because of DeSantis's leadership, because of, the speeches he gives, but because of the action that he executes, and talk about what is actually possible in terms of policy?
Well, leadership matters, and you see the fighting now between the House and the governor, and not a lot's getting done. We're not getting property tax reform as the governor's called for. It's just you see it on issue after issue. So leadership matters. There's nobody in this race that has the leadership experience I have, and also the results of actually delivering results. And there's a big difference, Jenna, between a campaign conservative and a true believer. We've got a lot of people that will say whatever they think you need to say. They're always pro-life, but when it comes down to fighting for life, in the case of Amendment 4, Amendment 3 last year, these extreme abortion amendment, and also the pot amendment, they were nowhere to be found. And so leaders step up and fight the left wherever they're found. I've done that on those two amendments. I've done that on school board races. People want a leader like Governor DeSantis, who has gone into every corner and made sure that the left never gets a toehold. I did that while I was Speaker. I'll do it as governor. These other guys are focused on, on themselves too much, and especially Congressman Donalds, I'll say, is, what's the next thing for him? It's vice president for J.D. Vance. I don't know, but it's always a ladder climb. It's not really focusing and actually delivering results. And he can't point to any results that he's delivered.
Yeah, and that's just not, to me as a Florida voter, I want someone who is willing to focus on the job and actually execute. And that's what we've had for the 8 years of Governor Ron DeSantis, is just this kind of ruthless executor. And he has just racked up win after win after win. And, speaking about President Trump's first term as well, we've seen, I think, from Governor DeSantis, this ability to really have a great friendship with the president while maintaining lines that don't just have him as a yes man to the president, but actually when things like Amendment 4 that you raised, when that was happening, initially President Trump was okay with it, but because of Governor DeSantis consistently talking to him and pointing out, he famously actually met with him and pointed out what the dangers are of that amendment. And then President Trump actually came out and opposed it. That's the type of leadership, instead of just some of these yes men, which, Byron Donalds to me seems very much like a yes man. So, how do you view the relationship between a governor and a president, especially when it's of your same party, because you would be coming in with President Trump as well?
Well, I'm campaigning on a Florida first agenda, which means, and I said this last night to a group of activists, is look, President Trump and I will agree on 95% of things, but where I disagree, where it's on principle, you mentioned one issue that's important to all of us, I will stand up for what's right. And so if that means convincing the president, or if it means disagreeing with the president, I'll do that when it comes to protecting our children from the harm of AI. I don't want to see the federal government with big tech lobby pressure wipe out any state regulations that protect our children from having AI become your boyfriend or girlfriend, your dad or mom, your God, your oracle. And you see how these young kids are led down a dark path by social media platforms and now AI into anxiety, depression, even suicide. I will stand up and say, this is not right. We're going to put Florida first and make sure to try to persuade the president and our leaders in Washington, D.C. to not listen to the lobbyists, not listen to the pressures, and make sure we're protecting what we need to do here in the state of Florida, and that'll be putting Florida first always.
And I'm speaking with Paul Renner, who is running for Florida governor, and you can find more about him at voterenner.com. Also follow him on social media. He also has a War Room account now at Renner War Room on X, also his personal. And, one of the comments as I've been, seeing kind of the landscape here, one of the comments that voters have questioned about your record is where you stand on the Second Amendment and the so-called red flag law in Florida. Can you speak to that?
Well, I believe the Second Amendment is an individual right. It's a fundamental right, and I've got a great record on the Second Amendment, whether it's supporting open carry, whether it's passing as a Speaker of the House constitutional carry, so you don't need a permit to defend yourself outside the home. We also made an effort to unwind some of the things in the Parkland bill that I don't agree with, did not agree with that at the time. And on the issue of red flag laws, we do not have what blue states have, which is your neighbor can turn you in for having a DeSantis or Trump sticker on your car. A police officer has to sign an affidavit vouching that you're putting yourself or others in danger. This is a situation where, veterans that are suicidal have been saved, family members have been saved, where the guns are not taken by the government necessarily, but can be given to a family member. You have to go into a hearing within 10 days. And so there's a lot of due process around it. And if I thought that or think that there's not sufficient due process, then we would add due process. And if I didn't think it could be fixed, we'd get rid of it. But if you talk to most of your sheriffs, whether it's Grady, Judd, or any of the other ones that people know around here in the state of Florida, they have used it sparingly, but where they've used it, they've tried to really save people's lives in that process. And so it's not the red flag laws that we identify with blue states. I would stand in front of a moving train to stop that, because that is absolutely an infringement of the Second Amendment. You have to do something to lose that right. And so in this case, you have to show that you're about to kill yourself or kill others. And it's just taking a pause and saying, hey, let's give that to your brother, your sister, your mom or dad while you get some help, while we settle the things down, and then you get those back, and there's a process to get those back. So it's not anything like the blue state red flag laws, what we call red flag laws in the rest of the country.
Yeah, and that difference and distinction, I think, makes a lot of sense, and people have been very concerned about due process. But on the flip side, as a former prosecutor, you also posted a video yesterday on this really heinous triple murder in Kissimmee, where the individual that was arrested as the perpetrator had used previously in another murder an insanity defense and gotten off really quickly. And so your point was that the insanity defense needs reform?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, if you are that bad off from a mental health standpoint, then maybe you're not in a general prison, but you're in a facility, in a committed facility for your sentence. And if that's the rest of your life, that's what you're in for, because we're not going to let you back out on the streets. And so I support a proposal by our Attorney General to narrow that down and do just that when it comes to the insanity defense. But yeah, this guy was prosecuted in 21 and let back out on the street by a very bad prosecutor, Monique Worrell, who's a Soros prosecutor who failed to adequately stand up and oppose that defense. And so we're not going to let these people out on the streets when I'm governor. We're going to make sure to protect people, keep Florida safe. That's first and foremost. And, when you go back to the Parkland bill we talked about with respect to red flag laws, we also made sure that we don't have gun-free zones. That's what I voted for, to make sure that when a bad guy goes onto a school, there's a good guy with a gun to stop him. And that's fundamental. And so those that didn't support it can answer why they didn't defend our kids and make sure that we have armed people behind the school walls to protect them in time of trouble. And we have risk assessments in that bill as well, and hardening for our schools. And we, again, protected teachers to defend themselves as well in that bill. So there was a lot of good things in that bill, but there was also some stinkers, and those stinkers we'll remove when I'm governor and make sure we have full protections for everyone to exercise their Second Amendment right, unless and until they do something that puts themselves or others in harm's way. And at that point, that's when our laws kick in.
All right. Well, former House Speaker Paul Renner, who is running for governor, and we have to take a break here, but really appreciate it. And, this kind of policy and depth of understanding, is something that I would actually love to talk to Congressman Byron Donalds about and see what his responses are. We've invited him, of course, like we do all candidates, on to this show. And for some reason, he has not yet responded. So, we'll see if we can maybe nudge him a little bit. And for those listening, you're always welcome to drop a comment on his socials and ask him to come on and answer some of these questions, because Florida voters really want to know. But meanwhile, you can go to voterenner.com. You can follow Paul Renner on social media, on X, Facebook, Instagram, all of that. And we will be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Hey everybody, it's Chad with the band Unspoken. I've seen firsthand how powerful it is when the church comes together, and that's exactly what Redeem Health Share is all about. With rising medical costs, Redeem offers a more affordable way to care for your family. Their flexible programs are designed to fit your budget without sacrificing your values. Each month, members contribute a share amount to help pay each other's medical bills, and you choose the providers and the treatments that are right for your family. It's not just about the money, it's about community. Redeem Health Share is rooted in biblical principles. So whether it's a routine visit or sudden emergency, there's a caring Christian community walking with you every step of the way. This time of the year is a great reminder to make choices that reflect our faith. So if you're looking for another way forward, one that reflects your faith, this is it. Call 844-REDEEM-0 today. Join the movement, share joyfully, and live redeemed.
Do you believe in the absolute inerrancy of God's holy word? Do you believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to radically change lives and empower us to live like Christ? At Wesley Biblical Seminary, we believe God is raising up a movement of people across our nation and across the world who hold fast to the authority of the Bible and the hope of holiness. We are working today to equip tomorrow's pastors and Christian leaders through biblical and theological education and practical ministry that's accredited, affordable, online, and highly personal. Our programs include undergraduate, master's, and doctoral degrees, certificate programs, and even training for lay people. So whatever your next step is in being equipped for ministry, we're here for you. And if you believe these are the kinds of pastors we need leading our churches in the future, we invite you to learn more about partnering with us through giving. Learn more about Wesley Biblical Seminary by visiting us at wbs.edu today.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. There is atheist outrage in Lebanon, Virginia. There's a painting on a wall inside Honaker Elementary School. It features a giant orange tiger paw, along with the words Philippians 4:13. Now, that's the Bible verse that says we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. The Freedom from Religion Foundation is an atheist hate group based in Wisconsin. They get triggered by the name of Jesus. They say the message violates the law, noted that religion is a divisive force in public school, and they demanded the school district remove the Bible verse from the wall. Well, instead of telling the atheist to go to church, the school superintendent complied with their demands, writing a letter telling the atheist the Bible verse had been removed. They literally painted over the Bible verse. You know, it's a shame kids in Lebanon, Virginia have to check their Christian faith at the schoolhouse door, but atheists won't be satisfied until they completely eliminate our faith from the public marketplace. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and I'm realizing that my producer kind of inadvertently planned our guests where we had, the Florida man, and now we are having the Indiana man, which is exactly what everybody was talking about this weekend with the rivalry in football. So Congressman Marlin Stutzman from the great state of Indiana, who their team actually won in that game, joins us now. So congratulations for that. I know there were so many posts across social and so many people literally across the country, not just in Florida and Indiana, were watching that game in Miami. So congratulations to Indiana.
Thanks, Jenna. Great to be with you. I actually was at the game and I lost my voice. I yelled a little too much, but it was exciting for Indiana. And, it's just a great story, from a team that has the most losses in football. And, through hard work and great leadership, it shows that you win in America. And so thank you. I appreciate it. And we're all very excited.
Yeah, that's great. And what better way to lose your voice than being at some kind of event where you're just cheering and it's like rah rah. That's awesome. So that's great. And I saw that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, the Miami fans that I was sitting right around were very loud. So my wife said you don't have to keep up with them, but I felt like I needed to.
Yeah, well, that's totally valid, and Miami can get a little wild. But I saw President Trump also, and our Governor DeSantis. They were at the game, and just looked like a really great time. And speaking of that, this is the year mark of actually just yesterday of President Trump's first year in his second term, and how do you, as a member of Congress, kind of look back and reflect on, some of the wins? I mean, definitely there are some great moments that he's accomplished. I think the overall tenor, at least from what I've seen kind of, on the social media side of the world from people, is that, hey, let's try to boost this up in the next year. And especially with Senator John Thune, who was posting, man, he got kind of roasted in the comments for the Senate not doing a whole lot. But what's your perspective from Congress's vantage point?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Jenna, I served during the Obama administration from 2010 to 2016, and then I left for 8 years. And so coming back, my perspective is maybe a little different than some others, but I tell you what, I think it's so refreshing to have a president who leads. And, he's not perfect, but I'll tell you what, he's pro-America. He believes in America first, and that he believes that a strong America is good for the world, and I agree with that. So, when there's been frustration with Congress because Congress isn't getting things done and getting it passed, I disagree with that to a point. We passed the big, beautiful bill. It had the most policy changes in it. It was all in one spot. And I think that's where it kind of gets lost. I mean, we defunded Planned Parenthood. That's a huge deal. I mean, if that would have been a standalone bill, there would have been so much attention on it from the media. There would have been more attention on it, within the pro-life groups. But that was a huge win. That's in the big, beautiful bill. You got, of course, energy policy. You've got education. There's education choice that was in the big, beautiful bill. And, of course, the tax policy. We cut taxes and kept tax rates where they're currently at with the Trump tax cuts from 2017. And so I think because it was so big, it's hard. It's sometimes easy to forget and, looking at all the pieces that were in the bill that we passed. And it's easy to label it the big, beautiful bill. Well, people need to say, well, what's in it for, what's in it for the American people? And I think that's where it sometimes gets lost. But we also did a lot of other policy changes as well. But I think the biggest hurdle that we have is, even though we've got a small margin in the House of Representatives, the filibuster rule in the Senate still keeps Republican bills from passing easily. And I know that, there's going to be senators that argue, well, that's the way it's supposed to be. I don't agree with that. I think that, the American people elect a particular party and they expect the majority to then govern. And in this case, the Republicans in the Senate can't truly govern because Democrats can always throw in a filibuster, and it's an easy filibuster. So I think that's why it becomes that's the problem, where we can't get all the bills passed that we'd like to pass because Chuck Schumer and Democrats can do an easy filibuster and just stop any sort of movement by the Republican leadership.
Yeah, and you mentioned pushing through some of those things that were advancing pro-life. I mean, that's one of the top priorities, of course, here to our base here at AFA, and there's a lot of focus on that, of course. And with everything that's been going on in Minnesota, and especially with the invasion of that church in St. Paul on Sunday, and everyone, I think, who is rational is kind of clamoring for accountability. For a long time, conservatives have been asking Congress to remove and repeal the FACE Act. And now there's been some discussion to actually charge some of those people under the FACE Act. I'm of the opinion conservatives still need to push for the repeal of the FACE Act that was weaponized by the Biden DOJ, that could be weaponized in the future. There are a lot of other ways that the DOJ and statutes that the DOJ can prosecute and hold accountable, those under. What is Congress's view on that, and your view on, potentially repealing the FACE Act and doing more on the pro-life front in this next year?
Yeah, I'm all for it. And I think that, one of the things that we're seeing, and President Trump is so good at letting the American people see what the problem is, and that we're seeing in Minnesota, where they have had the most liberal government. I mean, I think people, we always focus on California, Illinois, New York, and they're very liberal, but Minnesota is so liberal in their policies over years, and that that's now starting to show. And whether it's, I have a friend of mine who's in security, and he actually does security with churches and does consulting and shows them, hey, this is how you keep your church safe. If there were, heaven forbid, ever an attack on a church on a Sunday morning or at any time for that matter, it could be a Christian school that, a person walks into like we saw in Tennessee and starts shooting kids and teachers. So the fact is that we have got to do more. And we also have to call out the left for, promulgating this sort of behavior and by pushing policies that allow for this to happen. Even though that act could have happened in Indiana, there are laws on the books in Indiana that would prohibit someone from walking into a church and behaving like that. They could do it, but they would be prosecuted. And so I believe that, not only does, President Trump has been the strongest leader on religious freedom, not only here at home, but around the world. And I believe that this is going to, again, push us, whether it's at the state level, they won't do it in Minnesota, but a lot of other states around the country will pass laws to address this. But I believe that Congress needs to act and do the same thing, just like we have the National Guard in Washington, D.C., to make sure that the D.C. residents and the visitors to our nation's capital are safe. We need to do the same thing and make sure that churches have the tools and the ability to keep themselves safe as well.
Yeah, and that's so important, I think, especially, as we are seeing the rise of the left and they're being increasingly hostile toward Christians in particular. And it's very important to ensure that churches understand how to protect themselves, keep themselves safe. What is your reaction, Congressman, to, Don Lemon going into this church and actually interrogating the pastor and suggesting that somehow that invasion is protected by the First Amendment and he's, invoking the Constitution to protect. It was bizarre.
It was so bizarre. And that's what, they've lost it. The left has lost it. Our country was founded on religious freedom and the right to assemble. Those are in the First Amendment. I believe that religious freedom is the most important freedom and right that we have, and we need to protect, because if you lose religious freedom, you basically lose all of the others, because then free speech is more difficult, because then you can't debate religious differences. You can't debate, you can't worship the way that we want to worship. And I think that that's why it's so important to protect religious freedom and to protect the church in America, because if the left, just like in COVID era, that's when I think we saw the left really come out and, show their true colors. And when they went after the churches, they didn't go after bars and taverns, they went after the church. And I think that's where some Christians woke up during that period of time, realizing, oh, the government does have a lot of power, and we just buckled. And I think that's where a lot of the movement started, where Trump, makes his comeback, because we don't want to go down that road. We don't want the government to be basically saying when we can and when we can assemble, and to allow somebody to walk in, and that is just, I don't see how it ever passes a Supreme Court, decision at some point, because you have to protect religious freedom and the right to assemble. And so when the left starts defending that, it just shows again where they really are. They are against Christianity. They are against faith. Now if it was a Muslim mosque, it would probably be much different. They would argue that you can't do that. But we know in the Bible that the Bible says that the world is going to be against us as Christians, but we just need to continue to stand and be strong and fight back those who are wrong and fight for freedom for all people.
Yeah, absolutely, and so well said. And I hope that this, is a moment in America's history that churches really understand that we do need to stand strong and be prepared for, unfortunately, some of those types of events. And we've taken, I think, for too long, we've taken for granted, the protections and liberties that we have in this country that thankfully the Trump administration is very much supporting, and the Republican Congress as well. And so looking ahead to the midterms, that was kind of an implicit focus of President Trump's press conference. And I'm speaking with Congressman Marlin Stutzman from the great state of Indiana. Where do you see the Republicans need to at least catch up that lag time between, what you're talking about are their priorities versus the perception of the voters in order to secure the majority still for 2026?
There's two things, we need to focus on. I mean, obviously, whenever we come to an election, everybody says, it's the economy, stupid. And I think that we're seeing this economy really growing. I still think it still needs to get to Main Street America, because I still hear from, small businesses and people that are still living, paycheck to paycheck. I mean, the inflationary period that we went through under President Biden has had such great consequences. I mean, all of a sudden, everything went up in price. The cost of life is now much more expensive. Thankfully, because of President Trump's energy policies, Republicans keeping taxes low in the big beautiful bill and cutting spending, that's something too. We're actually cutting real dollars in Washington, D.C., so the cost of the government is going to go down. We're going to start seeing, instead of concern about our debt, which is still huge, and we have to continue down this road of cutting spending so we can reduce our debt. It has to happen, but the economy has to be strong, and I think also this idea of keeping America first, making sure our borders secure, making sure people are safe in our communities. I mean, this sort of defund the law enforcement mentality. It's still alive in the Democrat side in Washington, D.C. and Congress. I mean, we see they want to defund ICE, and there's been some very unfortunate events, pertaining to ICE when they are doing their job. But the best thing that we can do is support our law enforcement, because that's what's going to keep us all safe. And if there's anything that we all want as human beings, is we want to know that we can go to bed at night and we're safe. And an open border policies is not safe for the American people. And so those are the things I think that people will see that the Republicans and President Trump have done and are doing and are going to continue to do it. But if we sometimes lose focus on, things, hopefully the woke stuff is beyond, things we have to deal with. But it's still those things that'll come back. I mean, the left just doesn't stop on the abortion issue. That's another one that we have to just constantly be vigilant at. And I think if we continue to focus on the right things, leading with our faith and treating people the way that we want to be treated is going to help us win, but at the same time be willing to fight back. And President Trump is a great leader to do that.
All right, well, Congressman Marlin Stutzman, go get some tea and honey, and hopefully you don't have too much more media and talking today. But, great win for all of you in Indiana. Congratulations on that. Follow Congressman Stutzman on X, Facebook, Instagram, all of those accounts, and know what's going on from Congress. He's one of those that actually puts out some really good information on his socials, so you need to be following that. We will be right back with more.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins.
You look at 3 of the 4 justices there in Colorado that voted to remove him from the ballot. They all came from Ivy League schools that had been created as divinity schools. What a picture of the apostasy in America when it comes to the church.
Stay informed with Tony Perkins and his guests on Washington Watch, weekdays at 4 p.m. Central on AFR, or catch up anytime with the podcast at afr.net.
Immediately, when we give ourselves first to God, we realize that everything belongs to God in the first place. We are really not giving anything back to God that He doesn't already own, because the Scripture says that God owns us anyway.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series, Investing for Eternity, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt, and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad, real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
I was afraid. I was scared what to do. Everybody wanted me to have an abortion.
Day after day, precious young women, scared, alone, convinced they have no options, are led to believe that ending their baby's life is their only way out. But by God's grace, Preborn's network of clinics is standing in that gap.
I'm Bert Harper of Exploring the Word, and I'm here with my wife, Jan. Because of believers like you, over 400,000 babies have been rescued through love, truth, and the simple gift of a free ultrasound.
Listen with your heart to a heartbeat that cries out. When a mother hears her baby's heartbeat, her baby's chance at life doubles.
Just $28 provides a mother an ultrasound that could save her baby. Go to AFR.net or call 877-616-2396. That's 877-616-2396.
Anna, California. When I heard that Preborn partnered with a mother in many different ways for 2 years after the birth of her child, that touched my heart and is why I support Preborn financially and in prayer.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and this is the Preborn Week, where American Family Radio is partnering with Preborn to sponsor ultrasounds and to hopefully help save babies' lives. So over 67 million babies' lives have been tragically taken since the inception of Roe versus Wade. Thankfully, that decision is gone. But still, with the abortion pill accounting for over 60% of all abortions, babies' lives are at risk still. And your gift of $28 can provide one woman seeking an abortion a free ultrasound, giving the mom an opportunity to choose life for her baby. $140 provides 5 free ultrasound sessions, reaching 5 women with the message of life. When a woman sees her baby, hears the heartbeat, we have so many testimonies of women who have made that decision for life and of babies whose lives have been saved. So your gift you can give online at afr.net, or you can call 877-616-2396. That's 877-616-2396. So many listeners ask me all the time, how can I get more involved in the fight for life? This is one way that you can do that. So partner with us with Preborn this week. Call 877-616-2396 or give online at afr.net. All right, well, let's welcome in Tho Bishop. He is the communications director for the Mises Institute. And, you know, everybody is talking, Tho, today about Greenland. And President Trump actually appears to be very serious about acquiring Greenland. We're still continuing to cover that story. And that, coupled with the Supreme Court today, is hearing arguments on President Trump's firing of a Fed Reserve Board member. So that member is contesting and challenging her removal by Trump. So that is Trump versus Cook. You can hear those oral arguments online this morning if that interests you. She was an economist appointed to the Fed by Biden and was tapped for a 14-year term in 2023. But Trump's attempt to dismiss her this past year was blocked by federal courts, and now she is arguing that the president did not meet the for-cause standard required under the Federal Reserve Act. So your thoughts on all of this and, how this relates overall to the economy going into 2026?
Well, then we're also waiting to see if the Supreme Court's decision on tariffs comes out. So it's a very, very exciting week on a number of fronts. This is classic Trump era politics, where there is a constant cycle of big events going on. I mean, any one of these things alone would be a huge moment for a normal president. Juggling three big stories, and that is enough on its own. Obviously, with the World Economic Forum going on in Davos, and a lot of the bringing in a lot of the major players in Europe and the United States with the shadow of the Greenland conversations. I think that's one of the more interesting stories out there, in part because on top of the question of what comes next there, one aspect I think is fascinating that has significance going forward in some ways is, you're seeing even like the European right-wing parties start pushing back on Trump out of the concerns over their own national sovereignty, and kind of the concerns of how explicit some of the threats on Europe are, and Marine Le Pen was one of the first leaders pushing back on some of the Greenland rhetoric, and I think it's fascinating because it's kind of this resurrection of it's requiring Europe to concede that it is definitely the junior partner of this relationship, and how that shapes going forward is going to be, I think, something really, really fascinating, independent of the Greenland, whatever happens with Greenland. Mark Carney, from the Prime Minister of Canada, kind of made similar remarks in Davos about how the old world order is ending, and we can't, nostalgia is not a strategy and things like that. Most of these people I don't particularly like, but it is interesting. I think the moment with Trump right now is making explicit what has long been the implicit, and what that means going forward, I think is really, really fascinating. And so again, it's just it's a crazy time. It's a very crazy time, and how it shapes going forward is going to be something that I don't think anyone can predict at this point.
Yeah. I mean, also fascinating. And, you mentioned Davos, and President Trump flew yesterday to Switzerland. There was an issue with the aircraft, Air Force One, that he was flying on. They came back immediately, said it was a small electrical issue. And then he continued on a different aircraft to Switzerland. So thankfully, all is well there. What do you expect from Davos? I mean, historically, this has been a venue where President Trump has made a lot of, the Soros-backed kind of, left-wing mafia really upset at his direct attacks on, a lot of their leftism and globalism and, some of this. Do we expect kind of that spicy of remarks?
Yeah, I have a feeling that Trump is not going to be is going to be bold. I did this is the big moment right now. I think I think that this is something I think Trump likes. He obviously likes being the center of attention, and now this entire meeting has been defined, by his approach to Greenland. And so, it's one of those situations where, he's used to being, not the most popular person in events like this. I think, that's obviously, a big part of his appeal domestically. it's going to be, but he also, typically has a better behind the scenes relationship with people like, Macron and with some of these figures. And how this is tested going on this particular issue, it's, I don't think there's much to pull from, to figure out exactly what's going on here. This is a kind of a unique issue rather than disagreements over, let's say, strategies with Ukraine. It's very different than questions over trade policy with the EU. This is something that the EU really sees as a threat on their individual national sovereignty. And so, I'm very fascinated to see that is Trump doubling down on Davos? Does he, make a more explicit threat, if you will? Obviously, with some of the disagreements or the trade issues going on, how exactly this plays out being in the room there on this particular issue, I'm fascinated to see what it looks like.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it's going to be fascinating to see. And Trump is also expected to emphasize tariffs and economic nationalism again. This in the wake of the Supreme Court being poised to determine the extent of presidential authority on imposing tariffs. So, how may he... President Trump isn't really known for, trying to kind of couch the issue subtly and, kind of predicting where the Supreme Court will go, all of that. He just says what he thinks, and that's one of the things that people, either love or hate about him. I think it's a great thing to know exactly where he stands, even if he could at times be a little more restrained. But on the issue, at least, of tariffs, what do you expect from him? And overall, do you think that they've been successful to the extent that he promised?
Well, I think he's definitely going to double down on the importance of tariffs in his grand global plan. Again, it'd be very interesting to see when the Supreme Court decision comes down how broad. I'm expecting some sort of pushback on tariff powers there. How broad that decision is going to be really, really fascinating. And again, obviously, this is back in the forefront with some of the pressure being on the Greenland question. Now, in terms of effectiveness, I think it's been one of the major drivers that has hurt a lot of the affordability issues, this past year. There's a lot of areas where you've seen major important gains. You see it in, gas. You see it in eggs. You see it. There's definitely areas where, as it was in the first term, deregulation, things like that have improved affordability issues. But there's other areas where it's not getting there, right? We're still dealing with an inflation rate well above. Inflation is not entirely, it's not driven entirely by tariffs. There's definitely bad Fed policy involved with that, but it does play a role there. And if I was the Trump administration concerned about affordability, allowing the Supreme Court to take away the tariff issue would be and then complaining about it would, I think, would be a major asset there. Obviously, the Trump administration still sees it's very important in terms of onshoring and things like that. I see the effectiveness of that in the long run. But I think part of all of this is that Trump is a president of action. Tariffs, being an easy button to be able to use as a foreign policy tool has been important for him this first time. And given the frustrations on domestic policy with how incompetent Congress is, I think that this is why foreign policy is defining Trump 2.0, is because he wants to get some stuff done. Foreign policy is a way of doing it. And so it'd be interesting to see to what extent the Supreme Court limits the tariff power that kind of intersect between those two different worlds.
Yeah, and this is a really interesting topic as well. The whole subject of affordability. I mean, that's kind of been Tho Bishop, my special guest this morning, content director for the Mises Institute. This has been kind of a Democrat term of choice. And a lot of people, I think, kind of read into it because it's a little bit vague what the Democrats mean by affordability, what conservatives mean by affordability, what Trump means by affordability. Do you think that he's kind of playing into this sort of linguistic vagary that the left prefers, quite frankly, because then they can, make it mean whatever they want it to mean when it comes to actually talking about affordability? Or should he maybe use some different, more concrete terms, or how should Republicans address that?
Well, the biggest problem is that so much of what is driving the inflation, things like this, are systemic Washington problems that no one wants to address, right? No one wants to address federal spending. No one wants to address the full extent to which Washington makes things more expensive. And so there is this constant game of trying to elevate certain, look at egg prices here, but ignore home housing prices over here. Or look, we've had success on the gas price front, but let's ignore other areas, that don't look so well, right? So the entire game, and again, even if you wanted to do it, Congress Congress doesn't provide much help there. The entire system is systemically designed right now to take more from the American taxpayer than they give back. And so this entire thing just becomes this little game of talking points. And so, I think Trump's done the best job he can in terms of not just talking about affordability in the broad concept, but trying to identify particular areas where prices have gone down. But I think that when he talks about how great the economy is as a whole, I think that misses the mark because a lot of the people that voted for him know that it's not. And I think you can't, telling people something that they know instinctually that they experience in their day-to-day life isn't true. I don't think that ultimately is a winning political strategy, regardless of anything else.
Yeah, and I think that both Republicans and Democrats kind of do that, right? Like when their person is in office, then the economy is going great. When their opponent's in office, the economy is terrible, right? And and regular Americans are like, hey, we want you to actually address reality of what's happening, and Republicans really need to do that. So just in the last minute or so, we have overall, where should Trump be focused on the economy specifically for things that actual Americans care about?
Well, I do think some of I'm glad we're moving away from the 50-year mortgage. It sounds like his next move is going to be allowing 401k for housing. Getting the housing issue under control is the biggest thing. Unfortunately, a lot of that is the state level stuff. But we need to be building more homes, and we need to be making it easier to. Getting that aspect of it under control is, I think, one of the biggest issues. There's a lot of focus on it right now. But until there's a massive impact on the supply side, that's going to be a difficult one. But I think that they recognize that's one of the top ways that people are feeling this. And so I'm interested to see what else they come up with.
All right. Well, Tho Bishop, appreciate your perspectives. We'll look forward also to see what Trump has to say in Davos and where he takes this. And also the Supreme Court arguments today start at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can always go online and listen to that. But follow Tho Bishop on X and also the Mises Institute. And you can always follow me and my team or reach me and my team, Jenna at afr.net.